Hey, we're back with the podcast. I'm not doing an intro. You guys don't deserve it. Anyway, uh,
Oh, Jesus.
what have they done? I don't deserve it
Uh,
either.
watched our channel.
Yeah. Oh man, I peaked there. All right, I'll turn down my mic. All right. But yeah, we're just gonna talk about the national championships and pretty much the current format and some of our thoughts on it. And I know we have a lot different thoughts than a lot of other Yu-Gi-Tubers and YouTubers and stuff and people that talk like make Yu-Gi-Oh content. Um, so I'll just go
Are
first.
my opinions that different?
Maybe I don't know. We usually are. I will say both of us usually do have a lot different of opinion, and then they come.
Which is kind of hilarious because we do complain about the stuff,
Mm,
but I think we're what's called old poor people, old type of poor people. We're not the new type of poor. We just accept.
um, I think. Well, I'll just go with what I think about the format. I think it's fine. Like as weird as that is, I know that we're in a tier 0 format because most of the decks,
It reminds me of Zoo.
yeah, it's like
It
tier.
was a good engine. It's a
Mm,
great freaking engine, and a lot of different decks of varieties can run it. So yes, there is a number one deck that runs it, but it feels like the counter strategy to them doesn't get too shut off by the counter strategy to the main, meta deck. I think.
I also like to think that like there are easy shutdowns for it and stuff like that too. Like Droll will completely shut off the Fiendsmith engine like almost entirely. Like especially if they start with Engraver. If they start with Tack, you can probably get around it. It just depends on what version of Fiendsmith. But like if you're talking about like the Snake Eye version, they're not gonna have as good of a time playing out of Droll. They can, but they're not gonna have like an amazing time. Same thing with like so like there's good answers to it too. Shifter, if you're a rogue deck and you can run Shifter, it's really good. And so like there's like a lot of like really good answers to the meta decks.
Back to back to Droll is that it's fine. I think what makes this format fine for me is that I can run Droll mainboard.
Mm,
It'll out the top decks, it'll out the big deck, but it also cripples or hurts a lot of the counterplay decks too.
yeah,
So like it doesn't feel like, oh man, I can't mainboard this card because it loses to every other deck. You know, it's fine to play it, and then if the deck you're playing against it doesn't do as much, it's an easy side out
like
as compared to going into game one where you would have counter play cards to the main top deck, and you run into a rogue deck that goes, yeah, that card does nothing. It'd be like before we got the Fiendsmith engine, it'd be like mainboarding bestials.
mm-hmm.
It just
That
doesn't hit enough things.
yeah. Like you could like for bestial like the bestial argument is that like it's good against the Fiendsmith stuff. But then you look at like the Snake Eyes and everything and it's not very good. And there were people that were running it during Snake Eye format. But it was for like niche interactions rather than like actual things. So yeah. And I will say it is cool. We've seen so many decks kind of pop up. And granted, a lot of them are running the Fiendsmith engine, but like Memento, I don't even know what that deck does for sure. Like I've faced against it so many times. I've lost against it a couple times. I've won against it more time most of the time, and I don't know what it does, but it's gotten
Just
tops.
I've just straight up lost to it. I like at some points I just like roll, they do their thing, and I go, I lose?
I,
Okay. And then sometimes they just don't do anything and I go, I win? Okay.
yeah,
Um,
I don't know.
yeah, like with you, I still don't know what that memento deck does.
I know they pop their own cards and they send a lot of their cards to the graveyard, but that's all I know. like, and then they start comboing off, and it feels like they always have like the two cards that are almost in engine to like stop you from like shutting down their combo. Like almost every time I
It's
played
just like
against it,
can't can't interact with me if I'm destroying my own stuff.
yeah, like well, this one time, like I tried to stop the like Dark Blade one, and they just popped it instead because I used Impermer Veiler on it, and I was like, oh, all right then. They already had the card to get them out of this. Cool. Uh, but yeah, we watched. I know you watched the NAWCQ, and I watched the like part of the European one. We both watched the North America one. Uh,
Yeah, the North America one I watched just because it kind of gives me a general idea of what our format's going to look like,
yeah.
you know. Plus, I wanted to see exactly what the Fiend Smith was doing and how people were playing around it. I didn't watch much of the European one, which I'm sad I didn't because when I was watching it, it was great because they would pull the people aside and go over their plays and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I'm seeing there going, why does Europe do these such cool things and their screen is bigger and shows more of the match than ours? Like,
Yeah.
and why are they trying to not let them do freaking premiere events anymore? They're superior to us.
I have a feeling. Like the only thing I could think of why they keep like giving them the short end of the stick, even though their premiere events are really really amazing, is that like maybe it costs too much. Uh, like
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Yeah, what they do does cost a lot. Plus, they blow Transformers, I guess.
yeah, that was wild. Like they blew. It wasn't a transformer. It was like a breaker box. It like their whole
I read
breaker.
about it.
The breaker, like one of the
But
breakers, like blew
I
up.
love it because all you hear is response, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're just like, yeah, I'm responding, I guess.
Yeah, when a breaker or transformer explodes, it is loud, like really
Yeah.
really loud.
Oh, I've been around them. I mean, where we live, we hear it.
Mm. I got one right outside. I got a like telephone pole or electric pole or whatever they're called, freaking right outside with the transformer. And one time a squirrel grabbed or walked across the line and touched it and exploded. Squirrel and
That
transformer.
happened at work. That happened at work. We're just sitting there in the office, and suddenly all we hear is a.
Mm.
And like I went out, and someone was like, "Oh, did you hear what just happened?" I'm like, "What happened?" And like, squirrel just got blown up, and I went, "What?"
Yeah, ours the transformer and the squirrel blew up at the same time. Just,
Oh,
so it was really loud. And yeah, but yeah, it was wild. But I will say, some of the feature matches showed a lot of really cool decks. I enjoyed watching both the rogue decks and the meta decks to a certain degree. I got tired of the Snake Eye mirror because it's like one of the least interesting mirror matches, and because every time we watched it, like when we watched the NA one and when I watched the European one, they seemed like non games. Really, like it.
I've seen better ones with that deck though. I've watched like the interaction, but like at that level, it's non-game really.
It,
Because
it
like it's like I answer that, I answer that, I answer that, I answer that, and it's just nothing.
mm, it
Real
really
nothing burger on a lot of that.
that one
Now
actually.
watching that deck try and interact with other decks or not be able to, and the other deck just going, I'm doing this and this.
Mm,
That's interesting. The mirror is what's boring with them.
yeah, it because I think it's because it interacts on a different axis, so like it than a lot of other decks. So when you hit that and have another one interact with it, it does weird things, especially because like if you play that deck right, and when you make your end board, like a lot of them they were ending on like a 3 material Appaloosa, a negate that negates face up things and like stuff like that, like from the Fiendsmith, and like a few and then a way to link off their board if they have to, and everything with the IP line as well. When you do stuff like that, when you against another Snake Eye player, it actually is really hard for them to break through. But then you get stuff like Tier Limit, which can just play through all that stuff if they get like the right hand, and they don't even need like side deck cards or something. They can like just kind of break through a lot of it. or Ritual Beast can do it too now. I've seen it. I've seen Ritual Beast do it. I think I've seen Memento actually get through it as well. I still don't know what that deck does, but I've seen it get through like a huge field. So whatever it does something interesting.
One day we'll get to see a good sprite matchup.
Yeah, I know that I was seeing people because it wasn't on like a feature match. I've just seen replays of people playing through these big boards and stuff like that with Memento, and it. I saw a couple people on Twitter saying that they think that there's like some kind of weird conspiracy that Memento never is getting. It keeps getting top 64, like one or two lists keep getting it, but they don't ever have it on the feature. So
Is that like in Magic, going off topic, when we had Eldrazi Winter,
mm,
and there was a lot of conspiracy people going, they gave all the pros Eldrazi cards and told them that they need to sell this set, so play the deck.
I think, I mean, I think it's a little different, but uh,
Yeah.
because one is just like it's a weird thing that they're not doing it. Like I understood in the NA one why they featured the Exodia Millennium deck and why they did the Mimighouls and stuff. It's because Infinite
And they bought,
Forbidden just came out, but and
yeah.
Memento has been out for a while, but they still didn't show it as far as I'm aware. When they got their new support in the set previous to Infinite Forbidden, I don't remember what it's called. The sets kind of blur together unless they're like the newest one. Yeah. So, uh, but
But
yeah, I think the meta is kind of interesting, and I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people say it is. And maybe that's because the top 64 have, besides like 50 or like more than 50% being Snake Eye, Fiendsmith and everything. Besides that, and then the next best deck is uh what's it called? It is Tempai and a third deck pretty much. It kind of is there. Besides those, it's like I don't know. It feels like it does feel like zoo format. I guess you're right. It feels like zoo where if you have the engine and you can put it in a deck, you can just make it work and it's gonna be good. And those cards, if those cards will carry you through it. I will say I do not think Beatrice is making it out. I think that is the
oh,
I think that is the card. I don't think they're gonna hit any of the actual engine of Fiendsmith. I think if they're going to hit anything, it's going to be Beatrice, because cards that send stuff to the graveyard, we have learned, are a problem in Yu Gi Oh! No matter what they are, Foolish is still at 1. The only reason Foolish Burial of Goods is at 3 is because there's nothing good to send. Extra Foolish Burial, I think, would probably be banned if you didn't have to pay half your life points and you could set cards. Because that's another big thing, is it has like enough drawbacks. So it's like if you but then you get stuff like but yeah, I just when you send cards to the graveyard that aren't super specific, like that, Curious got banned for like a similar reason.
curious, just, yeah. It's hilarious. Like, Beatrice probably isn't making it out because she's just too good of a payoff for almost every deck.
Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of decks that actually would be like, oh no, I don't want to send things to the graveyard. I there's not like a ton of decks that don't have at least one card that they don't want to send. Like Sprite in your Sprite deck, if you just like Beatrice lined it somehow, like maybe you just Fiendsmithed it and ignored everything and all that, and just went Beatrice, send Nimble Angler. There you go. It starts all your plays.
That's actually an argument people make to why you should play Fiendsmith, and I'm just like, but Sprind is still good.
Hmm. Sprind is Sprind is pretty good. Sprind is uh Tier Laments uh play Sprind as well, so they can send Merly. And with Tier Laments, it's really funny because we make a link to go into that after a certain point. Like the tier line for it now is like you do the Fiendsmith stuff, and then you make like the link to Fiendsmith, and then you just link it and something else that you don't care about off into Sprind. It,
God, that just sounds amazing.
yeah,
Excuse my laptop trying to die on us. I'm getting my concerns.
I don't think
I don't know.
it's not
You don't
picking
think
up.
it's
You're
show?
fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, it is. The fans are not happy.
It was really pleasant though to see Ritual Beast and Tenpai were the two decks, first and second for the European one and all that. So Snake Eye didn't even make it there. It was like Snake Eye I think made it, only one I think made it to the top 4. Like that's how like little representation Snake Eye actually, well, ended up, or how Snake Eye did over in Euros. But I also think it's cuz when they weren't getting events, there wasn't a lot of like practice with the Snake Eye engine for a lot of European player base. I could be totally wrong, but that's just what I think, because I remember at least on Twitter and Reddit that people were saying that who are European citizens that they are thinking about switching games or selling because there's no big events for them. Like they could maybe have a regional, but even then, it's like it's very it just wasn't, since they weren't having like big YCSs and stuff. A lot of them were like and kind of selling a lot of their collection and stuff. So I think that's probably why it didn't do as well, because like Tenpai is really easy, and the person who won with Ritual Beast said that they had been playing it since like off and on since 2005 or 15 or when it came out. So like meta looks okay for Ritual Beast. Let's try it. Oh well, no, it's not good. Okay, we moving on. Oh look, we got new support. Oh look, it's actually really good. Sweet. You know,
That deck can run shifter, right?
yes, it can. The deck, the deck
That,
before Shifter, the deck would play macro and Di-Fi. So,
yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, it ran both of those cards, so yeah, I can run shifter.
mm.
Okay.
And I know it's funny because like Di-Fi, I remember when I was running it for locals, and I had Dimension Fissure or macro, either one out. And when I used Kanahawk, one of the people were like, "Can you do that?" And I'm like, "I'm returning it. I'm not sending them."
Return it to the graveyard. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
That's also why, judging me, that's also why if you return something that says sent to the graveyard,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can't like return it from the banish to the graveyard or banishment as they're calling it and expect to get anything out of it because it won't activate its effect. It's just a
Well,
rule.
we've like, I know we've talked about this before and we weren't recording, but like the graveyard is its own, like, is a pretty special zone for a lot of things. Like when something says ignoring summoning conditions, it's still, if to summon something from the graveyard, you still have to properly summon it. Even if it says that, like level modulation says that you can special an LV monster from your graveyard, ignoring summoning conditions, and then your opponent draws 2 cards. Um, you still need to actually summon the thing properly to do it.
Yeah, it's just a rule that they baked into the game.
Mm.
I I understand why they did it because there's so many things that you could cheat that just wouldn't be great.
Like imagine you use like a Dogmatica package, right? And you send some big like big fusion synchro or something, and then you play something that just summons it, ignoring summoning condition and everything. If it worked that way, like that could, like that engine, the Dogmatica engine, probably would have been. I mean, it was hit at one time, but it probably would have been hit again and never came back because of the way that that would work. But because of the way
Yeah,
Yu-Gi-Oh's rulings work and how just the game mechanics work, that engine was fine, and it always, and outside of like a few instances, it always has been.
I think that yeah, that's speaking of rules and stuff like that. That's uh, what other Yu-Gi-Oh news do you got from?
Um, well, I mean, like I know that there's a lot of talk about Rage of the Abyss and stuff, which is the set coming, the next main set coming after the Infinite Forbidden and everything. And we're getting new Mermail support, which our friend who was like, I'm done with card games, is like, I'm coming back, I guess.
I think my favorite part about that is every time he goes to stop playing the game, some mermail thing comes out and he goes, "They keep dragging me back in."
Yeah, that's why I sent that meme or what, that like clip or whatever. I don't remember the movie. It was like, every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
Yeah,
But
I just I saw that and I was like, "Come on, man, you've escaped. Just leave. Just don't come back. You don't. I want you back, but don't come back, man.
I
You're
even
living a
told him,
happier life."
it's probably not gonna do anything. And then
Yeah, he's living a happy life. He should,
uh,
some people, Yu-Gi-Oh's just too much for them to balance over their happy life.
well, someone explained to me how good the new Mermail XEs actually is, and I was like, well, I reread it and I realized how good it actually is. Because you don't care about the detach effect, you care about the fact that if it's sent to the graveyard, you special summon 3 level 3 water monsters from your graveyard or lower. So you link it off, and then you have 3 more link materials to go into, and being
Oh
waterlocked,
no, you're locked into
yeah,
waters.
and being waterlocked
What
is
is that world dragon thing that just straight up bounces the field?
Zelantis. Flick,
Zelantis? Come on.
it
You
flickers
could
the field.
Zelantis your opponent's, yeah, you could Zelantis your opponent's field away and their monsters won't return if you're waterlocked.
Hmm. Yeah, it's being waterlocked is not that big of a deal. I know that like some people when they read the card try to make it one. It's not. I guess I could talk about one of the cards in Infinite Forbidden that I tried playtesting with and realized how bad it actually is. Uh, Dominus Purge is the name of the card. It is the hand trap version that's an actual trap of Ash Blossom.
Oh yeah, that one, yeah.
And
Don't touch that. That card's not great.
I want to tell you why that card is bad though. It only stops adding from hand. That's it. It's very narrow. It doesn't stop special summoning from deck or sending from deck to graveyard. And that actually, when I was trying to playtest that card, actually came up so much that I was like, nope.
Yeah, it's like looking at it too. I play all the traps. And
Mm,
even if it didn't disclude me from using water types or the effects the rest of the game or whatever, or however whatever it locks you out of, like even I was sitting there going, "Yeah, no, this isn't great, is it?
I,
It's really narrow."
I think
Like,
that,
but I think I have a higher assessment of trap cards and stuff
yeah.
because I actually play with them, so I know how to assess. You
Uh,
know, it progressively it does nothing to really progress you, and the thing is if you're going to run that, you might as well just run Ash Blossom
mm,
because you're not getting any other advantage from that card. Like,
yeah.
uh,
It's,
it's just not that great.
it, it's not. Like, and it would be okay in Paleos exactly if it didn't have the water part. It says you can't
I don't
exit.
think I'd run it still just because
That's
like
fair.
I,
It just
it's like
it just would have like some niche applications, I guess, that you could make an
my
argument.
paleo deck doesn't run imperm.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's how narrow, like imperm is so narrow.
There's
Is it?
yeah,
Yeah, there are things I can stop with an imperm, but usually it going to just get answered. It's too narrow. You have to have effects that aren't so, narrow. And if they are narrow, they have a big impact on the game. Like, Daruma Cannon. You
mm,
know,
um,
yeah, Daruma Cannon is basically all I have for that. It's only not the only
I
real
guess
narrow card in the deck that's great.
I guess we could talk about the I mean, we did in the last podcast episode talk about Mulch Army and stuff like that a little bit, but I guess we could talk about it a little bit more because that card is seeing a lot more play than it's it's seeing about as much play I think as people expected. I is what I'm gonna say because when you
Quick go second.
well yeah when you average it because some people were like oh you just always cited in going second and then some people were like no you play it at 3 always, and even in the main, keep it in the main deck, and it's like start with it because it, if you lose the die roll, it's there. But I think only certain decks want Mulch Army, and we've seen which ones do and which ones don't in the main deck. I think it's okay uh, to main deck it in Tenpai because Tenpai is gonna go wants to go second anyway. I think it's okay to main deck it in Tearlament because even though Tearlament wants to go first, we can fuse with it. If
I
like
guess at that fact, Sprite could play it too and just use it as a swap frog's discard target.
yeah, man,
And you can recycle it.
mm-hmm. I will say though, I am pretty happy about the Fiendsmith engine because it makes it so I don't feel like I need to run the Horus engine in Tearlament. I don't think that engine is very good in Tearlament. I know that the whole Tearlament group would disagree with me because you still get people playing it even alongside the Fiendsmith stuff, and I'm like, why would you do that? You don't need to anymore. And they're like, well, with the Horus stuff, it allows me to push through more. And I was like, you could still do that, and you could still do that. I've played through like everything in that deck.
Horus works in tier limit until you understand your cards need to be sent by card effect. And once you understand that, you can't activate them off of the Horus thing anymore because then you'd be cheating.
Yeah, well, the whole point is to get to
I know.
the whole point is to get to zombie vampire, and then you mill,
Oh yeah.
and then you mill for.
But then you're also milling the opponent. That's
Yeah, I know. And then you special if they have a graveyard effect, you
you
special
know how many
summon
times
one.
they've just like put themselves like Horus decks have put themselves in such bad situations against my decks where they milled both of us. I'm like, cool, setting up my grave for me. Good job.
Um, I've won games because the Horus deck milled me. Not just because I was playing tier limit, but like even on Master Duel, if I was playing some kind of other deck and they mill me, like sometimes it just wins me the game because they milled me 4 cards. So I don't know. I don't think it's very good. And like the only cards you really want to be sending are other Horus cards, Malicious, or Trivi Karma, and that's like it. You don't really want to be sending anything else for cost. So it plus Imseti is like the biggest Ash target in the world. Like I don't know. I think it makes you more susceptible to hand traps than regular than just tier with like a small malicious package or something like that. That's just my opinion though. I know the person that got the top 64 at the NAWCQ wasn't running Fiendsmith at all. He was running an old variant of the deck, one similar to the one I was running before Fiendsmith, with a few changes and stuff like that. And our lists were slightly different. And I know when I looked over the deck list, I was on call with Stefan here, and I was like, "Man, this is like my old list." And Stefan was like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah." It's like he not since not playing the Fiendsmith stuff, he didn't have SP either. So it was literally like the old list. And then I know that the tier limit group was like, "This guy's still back in September 2023," and I'm like, hey man, he got results, okay?
None of us left September. Some of us didn't leave September.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the Sprite being able to run that Swap Frog engine again.
Uh, I love that the Sprite group has all unanimously almost agreed that you play the Swap Frog engine now, and every time someone asks about it, everybody says you play this. There's only
You play it.
even if you play the Fiendsmith stuff, you play it alongside the Fiendsmith stuff. If you play a Sprite.
You know how many games I've drawn my hand and straight up there was nothing in it but a Swap Frog, and I went, well, if they don't answer the Swap Frog, I'm in business.
Mm-hmm. Swap freaking what was it? I saw people for Adventure Sprite. I think is the only one that were like, no, don't run the frogs. But that's like a very small part of that Sprite group. It seems like I think most
They're
people.
still living on the cope of that era, though.
Yeah,
Some people don't want to change. I know that I'm like that.
I know. Was it when I showed you the sprite engine, I was like, "Hey, you can play it with frogs," and you're like, "Yeah, but why would I? Why would I want to play it with frogs?" I'm like, "Let me show you," and then I kept summoning Swap Frog on you, and you're like, "Okay, I get it."
You told me immediately, and then I was sitting there in my brain going, "But why would I?"
Mm.
And I was like, "What does this do?" And you're like, "Yeah, the only downside is you're locked into twos." And like, oh, okay. I was like, "But why would I play this?" And you went this, and I went, "Oh, okay, yeah." But
I summoned what was it like? I summoned Swap Frog on you like 3 or 4 times in a single turn, and you couldn't nib me that you because you had nib in your hand, and you couldn't even do that. And then I had like I ended on like Swap Frog, Elf, uh, on like 2 or 3 back row, and then like Carrot and Red as well. Oh, and I had like an IP, I think. So it was like yeah, and then I went,
beautiful.
and then I was like Swap Frog, negate or Toad. I think I summoned Swap Frog so I could tribute off one of the things too. I had like exactly enough room for everything, and it was like negate, steal, with that, and then you tried to call by the Toad, and then I went effect bring back Toad with Elf because you summoned a monster before that. So I was like, yeah, and then you're like, okay, I see it now. I see the
Yeah,
vision.
you were just playing with frogs, which, let's be honest, I just wanted to play with frogs. Paleozoics are cool. Don't get me wrong; it's pretty cool, but frogs is really all I want to play with.
I also remember, uh, I remember you saying if Totally Awesome didn't have such a good name, you probably wouldn't have gotten as obsessed with the Frog Engine as you would have either. That like
Yeah,
led
no, I
credence.
wouldn't know.
If it actually
But
kept its like its translated
Treat
name,
Toad,
yeah,
I hate that name.
yeah,
I hate that name. That name is a direct translation and doesn't actually facilitate what the card is about.
mhm,
Totally Awesome tells you what the card is about.
about being
It's a pun, and that's what they're supposed to be, is puns.
about being totally awesome.
The card does everything. It has three effects.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a card from you, it negates and takes.
Mm-hmm.
Great. That alone has gotten cards banned. I mean, well, not the take part of it. It's great. It summons something from the deck, and when it goes to the graveyard, it just puts a water monster back in the hand. Even himself, like he is, the Konami pushing the envelope with what they could get away with, and OCG hates it. I think OCG hates everything about Toad.
Also, there's not a once per turn on that card.
No, there's not a once per turn anywhere on that card.
I think
You summon two toads, you could summon two from the deck.
there's a soft once per turn, I guess, on the but like there's not a hard one. Yeah. So I don't know because I played Toad in spellbooks in the Dogmatica one because you can send it to add Blue Boy back because it's any water. So
I know, because I've played games in the sprite deck at full power before,
hmm,
where I was just sending the toad, putting a water monster back in my hand, bringing him back, sending the toad again, putting another water monster in my hand, and just doing that loop like 3 times. And the opponent go, cards in hand, four,
mm-hmm.
three added off of the toad.
Toad's so good.
Is
To-
not fair. And by any means is that card fair.
it
It's also the argument that we had the other day. Well, not argument, the discussion you had with me that my deck is actually what a lot of
Yugi Boomers.
Yugi boomers hate.
Yeah.
That my deck does exactly what they say is wrong with Yu-Gi-Oh, which is put up negates and
Take it
just do it off of like one card.
take like a pretty decently long turn too in order to do it as well. Like you play fast, but the deck still takes a while to get everything set up. So like that's like another thing that they complain about. And I saw someone say, "Oh, we have multiple Yugi Boomers." When I said I didn't know what an emote meant and everything until I used context clues, and and I almost went, "How dare you?"
But I think my favorite part about that swap or playing the toad in that deck and everything, and you saying that is you also said the line that they would argue that the deck is really easy to play
Yeah.
and that it just puts out easy, mindless things. And I looked at you and I said what I would always say. I would hand them the deck and go, okay, show me how to do it. I will play you with any deck you want, and you will sit here and you'll show me how easy it is to do those exact plays I did without reference.
Hmm. I know that
'Cause there's a lot of people that had to have flow charts and stuff to figure out the freaking sprite deck.
I know that people didn't like tier limit was it's funny with tier is because people just like naturally understood how hard that deck was. I didn't have to argue about how hard that deck actually is. People just understood it. You know, I've had more arguments that Tenpai is easy than tier is hard, and that usually doesn't happen. Because I've had
I
people
think my
try to argue Tenpai actually is kind of I've seen like not a lot. I've seen like a very small amount saying Tenpai takes skill, and I went Tenpai doesn't take a ton of skill. Tenpai takes like game knowledge more than anything. It doesn't take like knowing how your cards interact with everything and how to get from point A to point B. No, white, red, and to a lesser extent yellow is full OTK if they don't stop you.
yeah, I think my favorite thing though is I have handed sprite deck off to someone else and they tried playing it and they're like, "This is a little hard." And I'm like, "Yeah," and like you make it look so easy and you always say that you're a brainless player and I'm like, "Look, most of what I do in the sprite deck is purely instinct."
Well, it's like Jordan and Adam back in our friend Jordan and Adam back in the day when I first got the spellbook deck and they complained about it or whatever because how everything recycles. It's a control deck that just recycles everything very slowly and all that, and they said something about it being easy and I went, "Here you go. Try it. I was like, I'll play your deck." And they didn't get very far. They didn't get it and everything. They're like, "I don't get how you're doing everything." I'm like, "Yeah, it's a lot harder than it looks because it comes down to like that's another deck though, I guess. You have to know the game very well as well with spellbook. You can't just like
I've tried playing spell books before. I failed miserably.
I know.
Um,
That's
you
why
made fun of me,
I did.
but I gotta admit that I don't think that was my deck list either. So
Mm. I remember
uh,
I remember when you're like, "I'll play spellbooks during Dragon Ruler tournament." I was like, "Please don't play Dragon Rulers. I don't want to watch that."
it's like spellbook is like sprite. If a person plays the deck correctly,
Mm.
it looks really simple and it's kind of entertaining to watch them go, yeah, I could do that. And then you sit down and you try and do it and you can't.
Mm.
You sit there and you go, how do they link these two plays together? And it's like, you ever want to know why I shuffle my hand? Because I'm trying to figure out what play I'm supposed to do with this hand. Like you have to actually visualize what you're going to do in the deck.
With spellbook, it's funny because like you're not building towards like this crazy end board. You're building to this like board that says, "How do I not die?" and uh and that like really trips people up too because like getting from point A to point B in a lot of decks, not only in Sprite and Tier, but even or Sprite and Spellbook, but like Tier can even have like people can struggle with seeing from point A to point B and stuff like that, and how you actually get there. And the hardest thing about Tier Element, in my opinion, or it used to be, now it's hard because of other reasons, but one of the hardest things is one, you got to keep track of all your effects, and there's a lot. Two, you gotta keep track of chain order and how that works. Three, you gotta say no to certain effects, which is weird and it sounds wrong, but you have to say no that you don't want to use this effect at this time and you want to wait till it's later in the turn and stuff like that. Because there's very opportune moments that you're supposed to do things. So it's really weird, and I know that like it just it's kind of like it it's kind of like weird. There's certain decks for me that don't click, though, as well. I'm pretty good at picking up decks, but there's certain decks that don't click for me. Tier limits clicked for me. Sprite clicked for me. I got bored with Sprite pretty fast though. That's just not my deck. I don't know. Um, a deck that doesn't click for me, and it's similar to like the idea of tier is you have to say no to certain effects. Is Salamangreat? I cannot play that deck to save my life, and I think it's because it's like a mid-rangey deck, and I just have this mental block about those. So,
I think I could sit down and learn Salamangreat. Do I want to? Not really.
mm,
Because it always felt like playing against Salamangreat decks and stuff, and even now playing against them, it feels a little it feels like it's mid-range control, so it's tempo control basically. And I was just like, if I want to play tempo control and have fun doing it, I might as well be playing Magic.
yeah. Uh,
Because in Magic, I love tempo control decks. They're great. They're really fun. You get to just tell your opponent, "Nah, we're doing this at my pace. And we're doing this." And
mm,
sometimes they get really frustrated and say, "You're just playing a really good deck, and that's the only reason you're beating me, Yu-Gi-Oh player." And it's true.
I I've had this
That's all it
conversation.
boils down to in Magic.
I've had this conversation a few times, I mean, we've had this conversation a few times too, but the animosity that like a lot of Magic players have towards Yu-Gi-Oh players is like is weird. Cause like when it's the other way,
I want to I want to say it's the older Magic players, a lot of the older ones that haven't actually had any real tournament experience and stuff,
mm,
are the ones that have that animosity because they just saw us as those fucking weirdos, you know?
yeah,
But then you have a lot of the like high level play ones go, I don't understand your game. All I know is that sometimes you guys come to our game and you start doing really good and it's kind of annoying.
yeah. I know that the thing is, and it has to do with but yeah, because I've seen people on Twitter say that they tried playing Magic, and like and everything, and there was so much that they're cool. They're usually really nice and accepting until they find out you're a Yu-Gi-Oh player, or they know that you are one. Then they have like this weird like hatred. And honestly, I chalked it up to being where we're from, because we're from the Oregon Washington area and everything, and Magic was started in Washington.
Yeah.
So because we're from here, I like just kind of assumed it was more of a because we live in the area it was founded. Not only is there going to be more Magic players, but they're also going to be like kind of elitist. It wasn't until I saw online that like other Yu-Gi-Oh players when they try Magic, one, they usually actually have pretty good success, but two, but two, they also still have the animosity. Like a lot of them, not every Magic player has it. Some of them are kind of interested in learning the game, and a lot of them, when they come over here, uh, they struggle at first, but once they kind of get the bearings in Yu-Gi-Oh, they start doing really well, and they start enjoying it a lot. So
Yu-Gi-Oh is its own language. It's not easy.
I think the best representation I've seen of it is that like you see people go from one card game to another and just to try them, right? And you can and a lot of the skills translate over, right? You can become a good Magic player, like a really good Magic player. You can play Hearthstone probably decently well once you like sit down and actually learn the game and stuff like that. Same thing with Pokemon, you can learn somewhat well and everything. Same with Legends of Runeterra, which is League of Legends card game and all that, because I played that and I did really well in that. But like until my favorite deck got like nerfed into the ground, and then I was like, nah, I'm done. but uh, but besides those, but then you go over to Yu-Gi-Oh, and the biggest hurdle is that we don't have mana. So for that's a big hurdle for a lot of card games to understand, because a lot of card games have mana because Magic had mana, and Magic was the first trading card game. So when you think of it like that, and the way our chain works is different than Magic, I think, and everything. So everything is just gas in Yu-Gi-Oh. Whereas in Magic, there's there's like gas in a lot of in some formats, so you just but those formats usually have like force of will or some type of thing. It's our equivalent of a hand trap, right? To stop them.
And to give a metaphoric comparison of Magic to Yu-Gi-Oh, and this is one I've kind of come up with on the spot, is imagine you're playing the game Go Fish,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you've only ever played Go Fish, and someone teaches you the rules to the game of war.
Yeah. Well, what?
Magic is Go Fish. You have certain pairs, you do certain things to, accomplish a goal, and you're doing that. Yu-Gi-Oh is war. Everything just you flip a card, you go. You flip a card, you go. You flip a card, you go.
Mm,
You know, it is two games of effectively power played differently. Um, or you could say Yu-Gi-Oh is speed. Is that what that game's called?
yeah. Yeah. Or Yu-Gi-Oh! Pretty much. I thought you were gonna say something like Magic is Go Fish, and then like Yu-Gi-Oh's like chess. Like,
Okay, yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh could be chess and dominoes if you're playing with links.
or I think a better one of my favorite comparisons I heard anyone ever actually like do it. Magic is like chess. Yu-Gi-Oh's like Call of Duty. Like, it's a whole different game.
Yeah.
It,
But if you're doing card game wise, like you
mm,
can understand the rules of Go Fish, you can understand rules of war, but you're probably more correct where Yu-Gi-Oh is like the comparison is closer to that. But you know, I was going within card game things, or I guess
I would say maybe you could make the argument Yu-Gi-Oh's or Magic is like Texas Hold'em or 5 card peak or 5 card draw, aka regular poker, and stuff like that.
yeah.
You could make that argument, but if you made that argument, then Yu-Gi-Oh would definitely be like, uh, man, I want to say OG, but OG is not very hard. The games last pretty long, so that's not a good comparison.
So let's say Rummy then.
Yeah,
Does anyone actually know the rules of Rummy? Because I've played it multiple times with my parents and I still don't understand it.
I used to know the rules, just like I know the rules. I know the rules of Spoon, but like,
Yeah, spoons I know rules. Yeah.
but yeah,
But if you sat down and played a game of Rummy, because there is like a lot of weird things you can do.
yeah, I, I don't, I don't know Rummy, so I know the games I was taught was poker, Texas Hold'em, blackjack, 7 card no peak, and OG, BS, uh, spoons. I used to know speed, but I don't remember how to play it because for that one is really hard to get people to play because it's usually that the people that know how to play don't want to play it, and then the people that do know, or that don't know how to play it don't know where to begin and everything. And like it's like, yeah, I could teach them, but yeah, now I don't remember because it's been so long. But this has been a wild
Yeah.
tangent going off and talking about actual like card games. That's fun.
Oh yeah, no, but I think that's like appropriate because it kind of determines like I think it determines how well a person can play at a card game or something by
Yeah.
how much exposure to other games and stuff they've had. You know,
I,
like me, I had to play stuff like Jimmy or to yeah, that game, Spades, Hearts.
mm,
Oh God, what's that old people's game? Oh, it has a modified deck. Oh, it's spelled like Pinocchio, but it's not. It's
oh,
Pinochle.
Pinochle. Yeah.
Pinochle. You know how to play Pinochle?
No,
Yeah, that game. It's so basic and stuff, but there's so many like
I don't.
intricate things to it that are interesting. And you
So
actually bid in it and stuff on how many points you think you can get, and um, it's
I
like pretty interesting game too.
So I don't know how to play Pinochle because my mom never learned how to play Pinochle. And my mom never learned to play Pinochle because my grandparents were like, "No, this is our game and everything. You play a different game or whatever." It was like my grandparents and their friends game that they would play, and they would bet money. So if
Hmm. Oh yeah, it's kind of how that game plays. A lot of them play like that. You can
mm,
bet money, and like at the end of the day, it's all about card games. At the end of the day, are very much about gambling.
I mean, it's because it's a game of chance, right? Game of
Yeah.
chances always have this like natural like urge to like feel like some sort of gambling thing because the human brain doesn't actually like unless you're taught it is not doesn't naturally understand probability or statistics. It's not something that we actually come pre-programmed with. It is something that we actually have to be taught. And I know that sounds weird to think about, but chances are you don't know the actual odds, like the actual odds off the top of your head if something happening. You can like make a random guess, but that's not the true odds. Like if you draw the one card you need to start all your plays, it's not actually like a 1 in 35 or 36 chance or whatever, or 34 chance or whatever that you had to draw that. It's actually a lot lower because
You have to look at the sample size of how much is subtracted from it. I know because a lot of that stuff goes through my head because
mm,
naturally dad made me learn how to do probabilities and stuff because he thought it would be, and I quote, pretty cool if my kids knew how to count cards on a standard 52 card deck. That'd be pretty neat.
yeah. What's funny is I never learned to actually count cards, even though I'm pretty good at statistics and probability. I never actually learned it, um, because it never crossed my mind to sit there and count how many cards I have and then do the math in my head of what people probably have and stuff like that. I probably could do it in like blackjack because you see one of the cards or whatever. But
It's the
anyway,
easiest one to do it in.
mm, but anyway, I guess we rambled on about other card games enough. Moving back to Yu-Gi-Oh for a little bit before we end the podcast. Uh, I think the format's in a good spot, and I think that there are a lot of good answers to the Fiendsmith engine. That it feels like an engine that is broken now because of what it facilitates. But if you took away Beatrice and like maybe the DDD uh XEs, like maybe then
Is he even really the issue? Because like
not
you
really.
can stop him from coming out, but like I think the engine itself getting to him is a payoff. If they get to him and you still have an answer, I mean, what were you doing this whole time?
I mean,
Because
yeah,
you know that the line that they're going to go through, if you could figure out what deck they're playing, if you're holding it that long, then you need to stop it from getting to that. I think this format is very much one or two decent interactions in hand if you're going second,
mm,
and at least, ideally three interactions on their turn if you're going first. Three to four is like optimal, maybe backed up with hand one so that you can prevent things
well,
from going through those lines of plays.
if you depending on the situation, right? The you could make the argument that he's a quote unquote issue because he Nibiru proofs your board because he is usually the fifth summon. I just counted uh which summon he is, and he's technically the fifth summon, and he's not once per turn. So you can negate
Yeah.
Nibiru, and then if they have something to summon on your turn, you can negate that too, I guess. Or on their turn, you'll have something to negate anyway. But like he's not that big of an issue. I know that the tier limit group was like, okay, well, what happens if Beatrice gets banned? Do we still play the Fiendsmith engine? My argument was maybe. I could see an argument in it still because you have Pilgrim Reaper. Pilgrim Reaper is a rank 6 version, pretty much, of a zombie vampire. It mills everyone for 5. Now that's bad because and everything. It's one more, but and it's bad, and that kind of sucks. But it also, I think it's kind of, but I think it's like one of those things that it's worth it, especially with tier. Um, the discard off of the spell card doesn't have to be a fiend. It can be literally anything. And I've done it on Stefan before when our practicing where I've discarded a tier card and then got the searcher and all that off of it instead of actually doing the line of play that like the normal Fiendsmith stuff because it's a very flexible thing. And sometimes a discard, especially a non-effect or a card effect, a discard that's not cost, can actually be a huge benefit and everything. And there were, I know there's some people that tried Dark World Dealings when tier first came out in the TCG because for all intents and purposes, over in the OCG, tier wasn't as explored as it should have been and stuff like that. They were more focused on Sprite, even though when we got it over here, we were like, it's Sprite's not tier 0, tier elements is just as good, if not better, and everything, and we don't even have the Yoshizu cards yet. But yeah, it's just one of those things that like it wasn't as explored in Japan.
Well, OCG has Max C.
Yeah.
So the idea with Sprite was you could do Sprite combos
Mm.
going first, and then just get a Max C onto the field, and then just put it into your hand as a hand trap.
Yeah.
So like OCG had way more interaction with it because they could just bring Max C out of the deck and then use Swap Frog to put it into their hand, and then just be like, okay, deal with a Max C on your turn.
Yeah, no. And like there was the argument. I've heard arguments that Sprite could play through Maxi a little bit better than Tier Kid. That was another thing I saw. But from playing Master Duel, I don't think that's necessarily true because
That's not true at all.
Tier Element, almost every single one of their cards is really really strong. Like even the ones we weren't initially playing are really strong. Uh, all 3 of our trap cards are absolutely like insane in certain formats. Like, I want you to think about our like we have a continuous trap that if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, it searches a tier name. And if it's on the field, we can send any monster as long as we have a tier or Visas. We can send any monster to the grave for a card effect to negate monster effect. We have an in archetype counter trap that if it's sent to graveyard recycles a banished. We have a normal trap that is Book of Moon plus Foolish Burial. Like it's ridiculous how like individually powerful each of the tier cards really are. So like and I realized this when I was playing on Master Duel like a long time ago when tier was almost at full power because they pre-hit tier. And what happened was is I think someone maxied me. I ended on Kit Kalos and like set 4 pass. I searched one of the traps instead of just full comboing and set like 3 or 4 and passed. And that was enough because if I mill, because on their turn, I'll just mill with Kit Kalos and I will just start my plays there. So that's, but that's probably gonna do it for this video. This video ended up, or this podcast, we ended up going on some wild tangents and stuff like that, and I ended up talking about tier more than the current format, but that's okay because I'm playing tier in the current format. So if it is your birthday today, happy birthday! Uh, thanks for listening. I know I said in the earlier I'm not doing an intro. You guys don't deserve it. If you made it this far, you absolutely do deserve it. And I love you guys. If it is, and if you want to help us out more, like, commenting, and subscribing helps, and so does
It really does.
instead of checking out our other videos. And of course, and as always, have a wonderful day.